we're about to get started with our flash talk section. So if you could make your way. Very excited for this diverse array of flash talks. It's going to be really great. Because of some schedule changes, we're going to have Kellen give our keynote flash talk, which will be a little bit longer than the other flash talks because we switched from the other panel. And then all the other flash talks will be 3 minutes. We'll be signaling you and you have 1 minute remaining and when to move off. So I sent you all out the order. And the one thing is that we have we have 2 online speakers at the end. It's Bryan and Dieter who have been moved to the end. Any questions before we start? It's gonna be fun. Oh, yeah.
All questions afterwards?
Yeah, hold all your questions until afterwards. Okay, so thank you so much. And Flash Talk speakers, if there's anybody, make sure you're up close so it's easy to move between. All right, so first up, Kellen.
Thank you. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kellen Nyamurungi Namusisi from the African Center for Clean Air. And today or this afternoon, I'll be sharing with you a generic presentation on the gaps and as far as air quality measurement is concerned in Uganda, but also in Africa. And some points on how we can, increase the use and generation of satellite data.
Kellen, can you speak up a little bit?
Okay.
With the air conditioning on.
Okay, thank you. So that's the presentation layout. I'll give a burden of air pollution, an overview of air quality challenges, how we harness air quality data mainly and its challenges, satellite data gaps and why we need it and how to increase the use of satellite data, and a brief of the role of the ACCA, which is the African Center for Clean Air. So a bit about myself, who am I? I'm a behavioral health scientist with 15 years of public and environmental health experience, focusing mainly on policy and research. And at the center, I lead the policy and program implementation. Currently, I'm a graduate student at the School of Global Public Health in New York University. So I'm out of office. Next. So I wanted to share this study by Fisher and his colleagues. On the far left, the graph or the figure shows us deaths that are attributable to communicable and non-communicable diseases in Africa. And it's pretty a recent study. And it has interesting findings. We see the curve for communicable diseases going down, but the one of non-communicable diseases going up. Then on the far right, we have 2 figures. One shows us the household air pollution, and the other is ambient air pollution. And the deaths attributable to household air pollution in Africa are declining. And even in the 2 countries, which is Ethiopia, 3 countries, Ethiopia, Ghana, and Rwanda, it's all declining. And on the far right, we're seeing ambient pollution, and we're seeing the deaths attributable to ambient air pollution, particularly PM 2.5 increasing. That's a big message out of this study. Next. So the same study, and this morning we listened to some of the statistics, but briefly, 1.1 million people die due to air pollution attributable deaths, and which is 16.3% in Africa. We look at ambient air pollution accounting for 9.3 deaths in Africa. In household air pollution, as much as it is declining, it's still very high, 30.3%. And ambient ozone pollution accounting for 3.1%. I wanted to give a message, a message out of this study, which leads us into the gaps we are talking about. And first of all, the big message is that air pollution is responsible for 1.1 million deaths across Africa, accounting for 16.3% of all the deaths. That's very high. Air pollution is now the 2nd largest cause of death in Africa, only exceeded by HIV/AIDS. And that's another big message. And ambient air pollution and its associated deaths are beginning to increase across Africa, whereas the household is beginning to decline. But even when we see a decline, it's still 30.1%, which is still high. Next. So this slide shows you the air quality challenges we have in Uganda and generally in Africa, and there's 6 major challenges. And the first one is limited data and air pollution. We have the second, and I will speak more on that, number 1. But the second challenge is we have limited capacity to interpret air quality data, but also to use air data in decision-making and policy implementation. We have the third as limited strategies on air pollution. We have really still having limited strategies to address air pollution on the continent. Fourth is low public awareness and demand for clean air. The citizens' science is still very low, and we see most people ignorant about exposure. Fifth is we have low political commitment in government financing into air quality programs. And also we have limited coordination of all players and stakeholders. This is a big, these are the broad challenges we find on the continent, but also specifically in Uganda. Next. And therefore, how do we harness air quality data in Uganda, but also Africa, and what are the challenges? 4 major ways. One is use of low-cost sensors, but they have 4 also key challenges. First of all, they need calibration almost every 6 months. They're affected by humidity. They need to be replaced every 6 months. And then in the rural areas, they need power banks, which is a cost. The second way we harness is through reference monitors, and these are majorly at embassies. These are provide, of course, high resolution data, but very expensive and very few. We have gravimetric data. Again, this gravimetric equipment is very expensive. And lastly, satellite data, which is really the focus of today, and it's the missing piece. Next. So I wanted to show the most used method, which is use of low-cost sensors. The far left is the global picture, and then the right is African. You can still see how scattered it is and how much is being collected through the low-cost sensors, being the major way we collect this data. There's still a very huge gap. Next. So coming back to satellite data, what are the gaps? And there are 2 major gaps. Of course, there could be as many as possible, but 2 major ones. One, we have weak satellite-based air quality monitoring and management system in Uganda and in several African countries. And what does this mean? We have inadequate equipment or infrastructure, no satellite air quality monitoring system that is clear. And when I was talking to my colleague, who is the environmental scientist, who you will meet maybe soon, Gabriel, he was sharing with me and saying, we don't even know how, to interpret this data. We don't even talk about it, So there's still that huge, gap, lack of a sustainable plan, even with this sporadic activities or satellite data that is available. There's still an unclear plan on how to, sustainably continue to use it and to monitor. Low interest, we still have, the academia hasn't picked this so much, and we still need to pull the schools of public health and the environmental health scientists to come into this and generate this data. Limited capacity to understand and use satellite data, especially when it comes to policy implementation. And satellite data not integrated or used in decision-making and policy development. That's the first challenge. The second one is lack of an integrated approach in modeling air quality data, both ground and satellite data, to give us the impacts on health, socioeconomic, and environmental. Next. So why do we need satellite data in Uganda, but also generally in Africa? Satellite data, of course, I'm preaching to the converted, offers a wider coverage and provides a comprehensive picture of PM 2.5 concentrations in near real time when combined with ground level monitor data. It improves understanding of the effects of air quality. Satellite data is also important to establish and strengthen operational systems to be able to use this data, but also facilitates easy access and ownership. We really need the African continent and countries to be able to, start to own and increase the utilization. And satellite data is important to strengthen national and regional capacities in terms of generation, use, and including strengthening scientific research skills. It's also critical for compliance, monitoring, and environmental law enforcement. And lastly, it leads to strengthening partnerships among all stakeholders, including stakeholders within the country at regional level, but also at the international level. Thanks.
1 minute, right?
Yes, I'm about to finish.
Okay.
So what are some of the suggestions on how we can increase our use of satellite data in Uganda, but also in Africa? Like a couple of suggestions here. One is we need to even understand who is doing what. This morning, we're talking about coordination, and we're talking about the different smaller pieces of satellite data projects in Africa, but we don't know who is doing what and what are they doing. So we still need to understand who is where and what capacity is available, or what are the capacity gaps, So we need to put everything, first of all, together. Now, I'll share a little bit about my experience in tobacco control. When Gates Foundation started funding tobacco control in Africa, we said, oh, we're doing a lot of work. We're doing. When they put us in the room and they said, okay, tell us what you're doing, there was literally nothing we're doing. We're doing very small pieces of work, and we called it a lot. So it showed a huge gap of what was happening, and only like small pieces of work were being done. And then once we started coordinating, the community grew, and we started to partner and leverage each other's capacities, skills, and resources, and we were able to, to implement meaningful tobacco control programs. So a similar way to put, the continent together and say what's happening, who is doing what, I think would move us to the next level. Capacity building through catalytic projects, including working with students, faculty, and students, masters, doctorate, and also postdocs. Engaging African governments to invest in installation of satellite infrastructure, and creating pilot projects to stimulate use and demand for satellite data. Lastly, I wanted to share on the role of the center. What can the center do? First is we can support in engaging and coordinating the continent on satellite data use and getting it into policy and programming. And I wanted to share that quote. That quote is very interesting because it says the satellite program will primarily address national security concerns. We will not be gambling with technology, she said. We are sure that our defense and security will improve through improved capacities or capabilities for cross-border movement, monitoring, and surveillance for the country. Uganda is going to launch its first satellite equipment in August this year. Hopefully that will happen because it goes into the budget and probably never happens. But we hope in August this year it will happen. And this was the quote from the minister. So for them, they're looking at security, but security and not any other reason for, Then, of course, we can support capacity building, especially the modeling, and we could support in conducting science to policy workshops on use of satellite data. And the reason why I placed that map is the strength we have. Those are the African countries so far we have a footprint in, and therefore we can be able to, coordinate and organize colleagues on the continent and be able to support satellite data generation. Last slide. So that is those are some of the activities the center does, and those are our three main areas of focus. Research, you can see there we're collecting, measuring air quality using the Purple Air and the Alaska. The other side, the research assistant collecting behavioral related air quality data and exposure. On policy, we support drafting regulations, guidelines, both at country, regional, and global level. We've done capacity building on evidence-based policy implementation on air quality, both in Uganda and at the regional level. We've coordinated partners. And lastly, we have a very important resource center here we are trying to build. There's got equipment. We have the low-cost sensors. We conduct webinars. We do workshops. We do have all the data publications together, and we.
Sorry, we're really running low on time.
Yeah,
We're really behind.
yeah,
So if you could say maybe one more sentence and then go. I'm sorry.
I think I'm done.
Okay.
That's the last bit in terms of the resource center. Yeah, so that's what we do as the center. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is going to be Gaige.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you all for switching so quickly. I'm Gaige Kerr. I'm currently a research scientist at GW in DC. I'm going to be talking about some ongoing work I've been doing to understand changing air pollution related health disparities in the US. As you can see from the list of folks on the bottom left, this work has been really greatly enriched by a number of HAQAST scientists and stakeholders. If you go to the next slide, please. So in this slide that you'll see in a second, what we do is we are using two different high resolution pollution data sets that have been produced by HAQAST scientists to understand surface level PM2.5 and NO2. These two data sets fuse together satellite measurements with physical models, and we use them and average them to underline census tracts in the US. You can see an example of what those averages look like in the maps here. We then combine those census tract averages with information on concentration response functions and baseline disease incidence rates from the Global Burden of Disease study, and conduct a health impact assessment of NO2 attributable pediatric asthma and PM2.5 attributable premature mortality from a number of endpoints. In the next slide,
Hold on a second. I have to reshare that.
Yeah.
Sorry,
this
Gaige.
means my
we're
time
not
starts
timing
again.
it, so-
Okay. It wasn't 2 minutes anyway, so this is a blessing in disguise.
We're just making sure that it's shown for Zoomers here. Okay. There we go.
Okay.
Okay, you can continue.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize that some of the PDF stuff that.
Oh, that's my fault. So,
Okay, no worries. So in the next slide, we took a look at rates of premature mortality attributable to PM2.5 from a number of endpoints that you see here, as well as NO2 attributable pediatric asthma rates. And we looked at these rates in two different racial categories, most and least white, which we defined using the top and bottom decile. So what we found is that the disparities in NO or PM2.5 attributable premature mortality range from about 1.1 to 1.2, meaning that the least white communities in the US had about 10 to 20% higher PM2.5 attributable mortality rates. When we take a look at pediatric asthma, which is what's shown at the bottom of the screen, what we find is that those rates are a lot more stark, they're a lot larger. So in the case of NO2 attributable pediatric asthma, we found that the least white communities in the US faced higher rates by about a factor of 8. In the next slide, we calculated these rates, but instead of just looking at 2019, which is what the previous slide showed, we looked at these rates over the last 10 years, and then looked at the relative disparities, which again is the ratio of the rate in the least white to the most white communities. And what we see if we look at these time series of relative disparities, which is what's shown in black, is that these relative disparities are increasing. In the case of NO2 attributable asthma, back in 2010, the relative disparities were about 6, which again means that the least white communities had about 6 times higher pediatric asthma rates attributable to NO2. And that 6-fold difference grew to about an 8-fold difference in 2019. So that brings me to the end of my 3 minutes. Happy to talk with all of you later in some of the unstructured time about this work and whatever else you'd like to talk about. Thank you.
Thank you guys for making that seem fluid and flawless.
Work with the hand I'm dealt.
Should I start?
Yes.
Hi everyone, my name is Madankui, and I'm a PhD student at Columbia University. It's my great pleasure to finally be able to give this in-person flash talk on connecting ozone PM temperature correlations with social vulnerability index. And this work is really part of the environmental justice group under the HAQAST. And you can see as many of the names listed here are the person who really inspired this work at the very initial stage. Next slide, please. So ozone and PM are both criteria pollutant, PM 2.5, I should say, are both criteria pollutants regulated in the United States. And they share many common meteorological drivers, such as heat wave and air stagnation. They also share many similar precursor sources, such as those released from fossil fuel combustion and biomass burning. As many past studies suggest that there's an increasing trend of summertime ozone and PM extreme co-occurrence, especially in the summertime, and especially over the past decades. So that really motivated us to think more about how the correlations between ozone and PM vary. And we're especially interested in knowing how this connects to heat exposure and social vulnerability, because this really gives us some idea if there are groups that are more vulnerable to a combined effect of poor air pollution and heat exposure, and maybe some other social factors. Next slide, please. I'll go back one more. So I started to look at those 3 data sets that are publicly available through the Socioeconomic Data and Application Center, in short called CDAC. So the first 2 data sets, the 8-hour maximum ozone and PM 2.5 are actually estimates based on machine learning algorithms that actually are calculated based on a large range of predictor variables, including satellite data and surface monitoring data sets. And the last one, the social vulnerability index, are actually combined based on 4 soft-themed data sets from the census level data. Next slide, please. So initially, I started to pick one region and look because I'm more familiar with the New York City region. So I first look at the estimated ozone and PM 2.5 concentrations. So the darker colors are the places that have higher pollution levels. As you can see, this initial look at the summer average do not really show any place that has high ozone and PM co-locate. Next slide, please. So I then started to look at the correlations between ozone and PM based on the time series for each 1 kilometer pixel. And this is not homogeneous across the region. Next slide, please. Meanwhile, I also look at the social vulnerability index, and with the redder colors towards the upper range of this color bar being more vulnerable places. Next slide, please. So for this is a very initial look at the data sets, and my next step is to look at everything more quantitatively and over a large range, time range, and also connecting this whole correlation studies with other data sets, especially heat exposure and social vulnerability in more detail. And that brings to the end of my.
Hi, my name is Giovanna Henery, and I'm going to be speaking about social and environmental cues for uncovering community perspectives on air quality. I've been working on this as a part of the Tiger team at CSU, and for the sake of time, you can see the rest of the team members' names on the first slide. But you can go to the next slide, that's fine too. Our team is studying prescribed burns in the Flint Hills region of Kansas, which are controlled burns of the grasslands to enrich grasses for cattle and manage invasive plant species. Next slide, please. We approached our research on community perspectives from the social amplification of risk framework situated within the protective action decision model. This is the basis of our 3 research questions. 1, what can this framework reveal about perceptions of risk from air quality effects of prescribed burns? 2, how do these perceptions of risk influence protective actions and protective behavioral intentions during burns? And 3, what risk communication efforts are there surrounding the health context of agricultural burns, and how can these be more effective? To answer these questions, we performed in-depth interviews with 18 members of the Flint Hills community. We are now in the process of coding and performing qualitative analysis of the transcripts using MaxQDA. Next slide, please. Although our analysis is ongoing, we do have preliminary findings to report. Hazy landscape and sometimes visible smoke were 2 environmental cues that participants mentioned as evidence of burns. However, the environmental cue that participants most commonly discussed was being able to smell smoke. Social cues were typically informal, with participants customarily planning burns with their neighbors. While some counties and fire departments do inform residents of upcoming burns, this was not the trend. This provides an answer to our third research question. There are relatively few risk communication efforts surrounding prescribed burns. However, participants did report taking wind into consideration even without any formal communication, which is encouraging finding relating to our second research question concerning protective actions. Next slide, please. Turning to our first research question regarding air quality risk for prescribed burns, participants reported that during burn seasons, they were concerned with a variety of health risks, including COPD, asthma, respiratory issues related to COVID, and lung damage caused by operating the drip line. There was, however, a noticeable difference between the concerns raised by rural and city participants. Rural participants were predominantly concerned with the effects of fire on property, life, and ecosystem, while city participants were concerned more with effects of smoke on health conditions. Next slide, please. In summary, these findings about the community members think, in summary, these findings about how community members think about the risks of prescribed burns provides context for any changes or improvements that could be suggested or implemented. And if you'd like to hear more about our findings, you can check out Jeff Pierce's presentation tomorrow in session 6B at 11 a.m. Thank you for your time.
So, hello everyone, I'm Ying Han, who also call me April. I'm a postdoc from Emory University, work with Yang Liu, and hi people online. Next slide. So for today's talk, I'm going to give an update of our recent work about applying satellite data in PM 2.5 constituents modeling. Specifically, I want to focus on nitrate pollution in China for 2 reasons. The first, as you may notice, the total PM 2.5 concentration in China has been dramatically decreased since 2013. However, the concentration of nitrate is still very high. And second reason is that particulate nitrate may have elevated toxicity. For example, in this figure shows association of PM 2.5 constituents and sources with ischemic heart disease mortality. And from this figure, you can see the nitrate has the highest hazard ratio to the ischemic heart disease. So we really want to estimate the exposure from nitrate in China and assess its health effects. Next slide, please. However, there is a barrier. Well, in China, unlike many developed countries such as the United States, we don't have a ground monitoring network of nitrate. But fortunately, we have satellite data from space. For example, we can use the data from MISR instrument from NASA satellite Terra that can provide unique information on PM 2.5 constituents. So based on that data, we also use machine learning techniques combined with ground measurements of nitrate and also other supporting data from multiple resources. We built exposure model to estimate daily nitrate concentration over the entire China from 2005 to 2018 at a spatial resolution of 10 kilometers. Next slide, please. So based on our model, we find that the nitrate concentration was especially high over 3 types of regions, including next slide, major traffic corridors and regions with many coal-fired power plants and extensive industrial facilities, and last, over cities with high vehicle usage and dense road networks. And further, based on this model, next slide, we're able to estimate the long-term mortality burden from particulate nitrate in China for the first time. And we find that in 2018, the most recent year in our study, the total death number of that year increased to 0.67 million in China, which means more actions are required in the future to control nitrate pollution. Thanks.
You can just point at me too.
What's that?
So you can just point at me too.
Okay, fantastic. I'll do that since I have a lot to flip through. It's more of a visual, as you might imagine, with the Enviroverse. So John Wheeler, famous physicist, said it from bit, right? Nature has been computing, and over the last 80 years, we've been computing, and I figured it's time to compute together. Anyone sick of Brady Bunch style Zoom meetings, or am I the only one? We are, right? Why don't we just have these meetings and do all this physics and science, right, in China or in Uganda or right in the middle of the forest fire and play tennis at the same time, right? So that's the idea with the environmental metaverse. As we all know, Citibank is talking about the metaverse being worth 13 trillion by 2030. We are building the environmental metaverse. And I'm going to flip through and give you an idea about what this looks like. The whole idea of this is bring all of you and all the work that you're doing into combined space. So where we can use different computational tools to do different things together. And next, yeah, a couple of these have a little bit of a flip on it. Great, one more. Again, I'm giving you a little bit more of a visual tour. Go, thank you. It's more visual, right? But the metaverse, right, we have to talk about more visual than Jed speaking. So what are we going to be able to do in the environmental metaverse? So think about you, right? Your avatar, whether it's real life, right, or more cartoon-like. We're going into that environment, right? We're going to Uganda. We're going into the fire with our different computational tools, with software, right? And with all these people in this room. And we're able to do modeling, monitoring, compliance work, and essentially using these computational tools, hopefully quantum computing, artificial intelligence, hopefully AGI at some point to be able to actually begin to protect the environment in real time. Keep flipping through our visual, right? Emission events, looking at emission events. For the last 20 years, I've been an environmental attorney until a couple of years ago. I saw the light and saw what's happening, and it's tremendously exciting. Fun thing is going back in time, right? We can actually, right, recreate these environments in the past and look forward essentially into the future. So be able to do real-time modeling as well as go into the past, right? Our experience and so forth, and see what those environments look and see what changes look like. And then all the refineries that I work with up and down the ship channel, as you flew in and saw, right, be able to essentially cycle back that information into reality. Let's keep going. And I'm going to show you where it's at. So being able to model essentially. Keep going. Thank you. Keep flipping. Keep flipping. Keep flipping, right? Bring infrared. How's Jed going to make money on this, right? Next one. So you can pop in and take a look at us, but I want to show you where we're at. So we've already started on the environmental metaverse. We've got 2 clients lined up to sell Formosa Plastics. So you can see what we're doing right now. We're using essentially Google Maps. We're not going to build the environmental metaverse. We'll let Facebook, other people do that. We're essentially creating a layer that'll run on that. It'll be agnostic. And you can see what we're doing is that we're taking different units. We're breaking them down in terms of emissions, and we'll just continue to get more and more granular with our data and with that experience. And so you can see people, right, us avatars being able to go into this experience and begin to model and monitor in real time. So that's what we're up to. That's where we're at. We hope to be able to be there completely in 2035, but we're going to make incremental progress in the meantime and deliver a product that hopefully all of you will be able to use in the future.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alqamah Sayeed, and I work for USRA as a postdoc at Huntsville, Alabama. So I'm going to present a method which I'm using to bias correct PM 2.5 through machine learning, or as we call deep learning. Next, please. So this is a brief overview of the methodology which was used to get this product. For the methodology, we use wind speed, relative humidity, and 2-meter air temperature from her model, NOAA's her model, and then estimated PM 2.5, ABI, AOD, and smoke dust mask from GOES East and GOES West satellite data. Then the output for that model was surface PM 2.5 from the AirNow network. And this all goes in the deep neural network. I'm not going to discuss how the deep neural network is going to work. And we get a bias corrected hourly estimated PM 2.5 from this model. To do this correctly, the whole geographical region of the CONUS was divided into 15 different regions, because each region has a different PM 2.5 high and lows. So the model was affected if we use one singular model. So for each region, a different smaller model was used. Here is some training and validation results. Top left panel shows GOES PM 2.5 for the training set. It's a log-log scatter density plot. The scale is in log. The x-axis is observation and the y-axis is estimated PM 2.5. The left panel shows for train set for the GOES PM 2.5, and the right panel shows the DNN model train and test sets. You can see that in the GOES model, we have huge scattering around in the bottom area, but those scattering was reduced and the higher concentration was more aligned to the 1:1 line. That was also true for the test set. We see a decrease in the scatter and more concentration towards the 1:1 line. The panel on the left top shows the relative improvement in correlation. The blue color means that these are the stations, AirNow stations, where we see an improvement in PM 2.5 concentration from the base GOES model, GOES GWR PM 2.5. We see that around 90% of the station shows an improvement. There were 10% station where we see a decrease, but those decrease when we compare overall are not much. On the right, you see error diagnostic plot. On the y scale, we have bias, which is model minus observation. And on the x-axis, you can see it's AOD from GOES satellite. Top model shows the bias for the GOES PM 2.5, and the bottom model, plot shows the bias in the DNN model. When you see at the lower range, both models have very minimal bias when compared with AODs. But when you go on the higher values, you can see that the GOES model is overestimating PM 2.5. But that was bias corrected by the DNN model and goes onto the lower scale in the when compared with the AOD. So in the earlier method, we are using GOES PM 2.5 from GWR as one of the input, but in this alternate method, we completely removed PM 2.5 and we use 62 Her metrology and just ABI AOD from the GOES R. And we found that this model is producing comparable results as to the earlier model. The benefit of this model is this one is this remove one axis part where we have to first calculate PM 2.5 from the AOD using GWR, and this saves us time. So as we were discussing earlier in room 3B, that what is near real time, this will be more closer to the near real time PM 2.5 production. That's it. Thank you.
Hey everyone. So I'm Amir from Harvard-Smithsonian working at Temple Science team. And today I'm going to talk about the possibility of using chromatography and observation from satellites to estimate on production rates. So I've been involved in this project for almost 2 years, and the goal of that study is to use the ratio from chromatography over NO2 to predict the chemical ozone regimes. But we realize there's actually a kind of the variably unused metric, which I will talk about later, that you can use it in conjunction with the ratio to be able to directly estimate ozone production rates. So the first thing we want to know if we can get the gradients right, if we can get the sensitivity of ozone production to its precursor. So what we can do, we compare the ratio to a baseline, which is L Roxwell Knox. That's the baseline of that explains directly the HAQAST and rock cycle. Because that's calculation of, we definitely use a model. So what we did, we used a lot of air quality campaign data, including one that happened actually in Houston in 2013. And we set up a box model, those observations. And we know our models are wrong, but the model that we created, it's able to produce the concentration of OH up to 64% in variance, which is unheard. So we use this very skillful model to be able to study ozone production next. So we created this plot based on this data from the model. This is a very condensed plot that I can talk for hours. So it compares the ratio of formaldehyde to L Roxwell Knox. And you see a lot of, you see that there is not one universal range to separate NOx sensitive from VOC sensitive areas, because you have, for example, formaldehyde cannot fully describe the VOC reactivities in different environments. There are some errors from chemical perspective. But as we was trying to understand if there is a universal threshold, we came up with this made up metric, which is formaldehyde times NO2. So the size of these data points you see is proportional to formaldehyde times NO2, which is a proxy that describes the total mass of ozone precursors. You see that the amount of ozone production is proportional to the size of those data. The highest ozone production rates happen on the right side of the figure, where you have large amount of formaldehyde times NO2. But as you move towards VOC sensitive environment, that relationship becomes weaker because we know the ozone formation is nonlinear because of NO2 plus OH and the formation of organic nitrates. Next. So we realized that, if we combine these two information, the ratio that will explain the gradient and formaldehyde times NO2 that will explain the mass of ozone precursor, we can predict the amount of the ozone production rates. And we know we can gain these two information from the satellites. Next. For example, these are two maps from Tropomi. We know that in theory, if we can quantify the errors associated with this observation, we should be able to provide a map of ozone production rates. And that's going to be way more informative than just segregating the chemical condition to different regimes. We can provide where to the regulators that where ozone production highest, and we can provide the hourly map of tempo in the future. And that's pretty much.
Yeah, our next talk is going to be an online speaker, so we're going to mute that thing and then turn on the volume.
Okay, I'll assume that you're ready for me to go. Hi, I'm Bryan Duncan, and I'll just give you a quick update on our project integrating NASA resources into the standard operating procedures of the LMIC. And in short, one of the main goal of our project is to develop a cost-effective approach to air quality monitoring and forecasting for these countries. Next slide. If you're interested in finding more about our methodology, what we're doing and why we're doing it, take a look at our GeoHealth paper that is out. It came out last year, but I won't go into detail here, of course. Next slide. Okay, so we're working with a number of stakeholders now directly to try to figure out, to listen to them, listen to their needs, and figure out how NASA resources can improve their ability to, say, monitor air quality or forecast air quality in their cities. We've worked closely with Quito and Rio de Janeiro, some health and air quality professionals there. And we're beginning to reach out to a few other places in Mexico, as well as hopefully Rwanda and Uganda. We've had some initial telecons that we're promising with them. Okay, so we're hoping to take what we learned from this close contact with a few stakeholders in the LMIC and expand this up, or figure out how to expand this up. how can we make these data sources usable by many air quality and health stakeholders in the LMIC. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah. So part of that is part of our main HAQAST project, but what's taking it to the next level is Kevin Cromar's Tiger Team project, enabling stakeholder access and utilization of data products, first steps. And in there, the idea is to create a website where health and air quality stakeholders can go, a one-stop shop environment for data products, and which would also be co-located with data, or information on validation, assessment of uncertainties and errors, and other documentation, as well as illustrative case studies. How can you use these data for your purposes? There'll be data product recommendations. And what's important is that we're setting up this prototype website, and a number of HAQAST folks are contributing to it. But one of the stars are these process data products, what we call at NASA level 3 and level 4 data products. Next slide. And one thing that's I'd like to make an argument is part of our project is to encourage capacity building, definitely, and that's what we're doing. But I really would like to emphasize that these process data products, some of which I've listed here on the left, are critical for many of the people in the LMIC, many air quality and health stakeholders. They have the desire to use these data products, to use NASA satellite data, NASA air quality forecasts, but oftentimes they just don't have the resources, the financial resources to build capacity that they need. So I really stress the importance of all you HAQAST folks out there who are developing these type of products. They are important, and we hope that you will make them available through Kevin Cromar's Tiger Team on this one-stop shop. Thank you.
Okay, hello everyone. So I'm Aurongzeb. I'm the technology strategist for Dell. Currently kind of looking at what kind of environmental service we can provide to our customers. In that sense, kind of when we talk to our customers from, for example, small communities to all the way to the city managers, they're all asking, what is the next step? What is the type of service they can provide to the end user, which is their constituents? So just looking at the whole spectrum of customers, what I realized that climate, we have to actually look at as a biosphere health rather than just human only. And so kind of show you what are the data stages we are now kind of looking at and why the biosphere health. So if you look at the right side of the presentation, there are 17 SDG goals, and then you have a high-level goal of reducing carbon footprint or holding the carbon footprint up to 1.5 C by 2030. If you look at the whole goal, number one is poverty, right? Reduction of poverty, and then you have 13, 14, 15, which is the biosphere. So what can we do to impact all of them or maximize the effort so that all of them can be impacted? As we're looking through various software tools, we found that World Health Organization has one health tool, which is very similar to what we're trying to do. So can we do a one climate tool or equitable environmental service? And can we drive some of the policies to implement some of this? Next slide, please. So based on various customers we have talked to, what we have realized, we have 3 layers of data set we have to look at. And somehow we have to connect them through some of the algorithms, some of which you are already working on, and then kind of get it down to very granular level. And then at that point, you have to create a microservice. So today, for example, there are a few startups, like you can see Airleap, and then the Street Scan. The Street Scan is not an environmental service, but it can detect, it runs some vans through the cities, and it can detect like cracks in the pavement, right? So if we can work companies like them to almost to the edge or IoT type scenario, like where you can see and
connect the GIS data that NASA and all of you are generating, we believe we can create a framework that we can actually really impact the Constitution. Actually, very people who are living within 1 mile of resolution. So based on all the work we have done, we have isolated to this 3-layer of data stack. And the goal is at the end, there might not be IoT edge devices in a lot of cities. But if we can create a model, we can generate a synthetic model based on some cities where we have all these resources. We can use it to where they don't have the resources. So providing that IT infrastructure using some microservices, I believe will really move the goalpost toward sustainability and equity. Next slide. So at a very high level, we have split the 3-layer of data need. We will be looking into algorithms and the way to connect those data sets, and then look at what kind of computing infrastructure we need, and then kind of move from there to kind of see what are the right policies. One thing we're always looking at is all these new technologies that are coming in, carbon sequestration, capture, a lot of these sustainable energy programs. We have to make sure the policies are driven so that they're equitable. They're in places where they actually need, and when they're deployed, has the maximum impact to the community and to the atmosphere. So that's it. And I wish I was there, but hopefully I'll meet some of you tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, amazingly, we ended on time. So thank you, everyone. Thank you very much to all the Flash Talk speakers. That was really a great selection of everything that's going on with air quality and our stakeholders and industry partners and so much more. So I really appreciate all of your talks, and it's been a great session so far. And thank you to all the speakers who've gone today and to those who are going tomorrow.